So, what's trending? Bridging your Catholic faith with your everyday life. You're listening to Trending with Timmerie on Relevant Radio.
Do you know a saint? I don't know one. Well, we do. We don't know it. You can be a living, breathing saint now if you're in a state of grace. And in fact, children, when they're baptized, completely free of original sin, without any stain, are saints as well. Sometimes think about that when I'm, taking care of my baby. You're a saint. Like, she's not capable of sin right now. She has received the sanctifying grace from our Lord Jesus Christ, God, in the gift, in the absolute gift of the sacrament of baptism. It's pretty cool. But my guest today in just a little bit will be Reggie Littlejohn. She's the founder of Women's Rights Without Frontiers, which helps save babies and their mothers and families in the face of what was the one child, now two and three child policy in China, where they have forced abortion, forced sterilization to this day. She saved countless children, and her work that she does now was inspired actually by knowing Saint Mother Teresa and having worked with her. So she'll join us to share her story in just a little bit here on Trending. We're going to be discussing Britney Spears. You may have heard that her conservatorship that lasted 13 years, where someone else determined everything in her life, from finances to work to social media, dating relationships, even intervening in far overreaching ways that we'll talk about. Well, that conservatorship has now ended, and it brings to mind a conversation about freedom, and also why did so many people in a nation that tends to be rather divided get behind this Free Britney movement. I'll discuss that and more here on Trending. First, I want to share with you something historic that has happened in the last couple of months. I didn't get to talk to you about it last month when it happened, but it's pretty significant. You may or may not know what has happened across the United States since Roe v. Wade when it comes to abortion and parental rights. In fact, when I'm talking about parental rights, I'm talking about the parents of the young woman who chooses to have an abortion if she's a minor. You see, a handful of states in the United States have had laws that they've passed called parental notification laws, which would make it so that if a minor under the age of 18 goes to obtain an abortion, a notification has to be given to the parent, and a certain amount of time has to pass before then the minor can have that abortion. So, for example, if on Tuesday one wants to go to have an abortion, she's a minor, she'd have to notify her parents, for example, in the state of Illinois, up until more recently. Well, it's still the case until the governor signs this. But now what's happened is a historic thing. So what would have happened is the woman would have had to notify her parents. And some states a 24 or 48-hour waiting period is then required before then you can still have the abortion. It's parental notification, not parental consent, not parental permission or anything like that. Because a woman has an absolute right to an abortion in the United States, no matter her age. Now, here's the deal. In the state of Illinois, the House of Representatives as well as the Senate voted to repeal, and this is historic, the parental notification law in Illinois. This is the first time to my knowledge that this has actually been done, where a parental notification law has been done away with when it's come to abortion. And it's historic for many reasons, but many governors and others have commented and weighed in on this, that what's happening in Illinois is a very concerning, and even many representatives on both sides of the aisle, Republican and Democrat alike, have commented on this. In fact, State Representative Tim Ozinga has commented, and here are some thoughts where he thinks there needs to be a little bit more debate.
I ran for state representative to represent the will of the people, and unfortunately, what happened last night was not representative of the will of the people. This topic definitely needed more debate and the opportunity to be talked through in a proper way and not rammed through at the middle of the night.
State Representative Tim Ozinga and others argue repealing the law violates parents' rights.
I don't think that's a good thing for children anywhere, and it's not good for the health and safety of young girls.
That's AB7 Chicago reporting Representative Tim Ozinga in Illinois on the repeal of parental notification in the state. And you may wonder, okay, this is Illinois. Well, I think this is something we're going to see in some of the other states, especially states that may have had parental notification laws, but we do not continue to see that they are holding to a pro-life position based on the makeup of their state House and Senate. Now, although this is passed the House and Senate, the governor of Illinois still needs to sign this into law. He could veto it. Unfortunately, I don't really think that will be vetoed. We'll see what happens. But here's why it's historic. Parental notification law is only a notification. It's not permission. A woman can still have an abortion. It's not as if she can't have the abortion by simply notifying her parents. Now, it's interesting because there have been comments from places such as Planned Parenthood, and I want to get to their comments in just a moment, that are very disconcerting when it comes to the current landscape of our culture surrounding abortion, what our abortion clinics do. But I think the big thing is that we're seeing an ongoing repeal or override in our current culture of parents' rights, making the assumption that parents who love their children more than anyone else don't have their best interest in mind. The culture is truly taking this perspective that parents not only don't have the best interests of their kids in mind, but that the state, the government, schools, educators, distant educators who maybe educate a child for a year, know better. This is what's frightening. This is why we're seeing various elections turn in directions you wouldn't have expected when those particular candidates run speaking up for parents' rights. Now, Planned Parenthood released a statement on the repealing of parental notification in Illinois. And one of the things they said that just absolutely struck me was they said young people can choose to involve the people they trust in their healthcare decisions and are protected from harmful domestic situations. That's what they claim this repealing of parental notification law in Illinois does. In other words, they're claiming that by not having parents involved, kids are less likely to be in harmful situations. Now, don't get me wrong. I've seen firsthand, especially working in the crisis pregnancy centers, that there can be parents who can do incredible harm, terrible harm to their children. But that's an exception. That's not the norm across the nation. And even when it does occur, it's important that we're not then delivering children up to the state for the state to determine what is and is not okay. Now, what Planned Parenthood said in their statement makes it sound as if a minor is safer going to an abortion clinic with an absolute stranger than it is going to its own parent. Now, here's the reality. We've seen with undercover medical and various research and sting operations that, in fact, Planned Parenthood and the greater abortion movement is known, even though they're mandated reporters who are required to report on any sort of sexual abuse, especially of minors, they're not. We've seen this firsthand in the undercover videos and calls made by people such as Live Action and other undercover investigative journalists. They cover up statutory rape. They cover up so many instances, whether it's familial or with a soccer coach. This is the truth of what's happening. There are many court documents you can even obtain from Planned Parenthood and the greater abortion movement of the various abortion clinics where it has gone unreported or underreported what's happening to minors. And so abuse continues to go on because Planned Parenthood covers up for abusers. So that's one of the big concerns, and that's why the statement from Planned Parenthood is such a lie when it comes to the repealing of the parental notification law in Illinois. Another big concern I have with this is that many, many young women face serious physical, psychological, and emotional harm and interpersonal harm after having gone through with an abortion. And when a parent isn't even notified or aware of their child having had an abortion, who does the follow-up? I can tell you it's not the abortion clinic. No one's there to follow up on how that young woman is adjusting in the face of her lost child and lost motherhood. It's amazing that we're arguing for a minor's license to kill when we can't even give a minor a Tylenol or any other medical procedure for that matter in the United States without parental, not notification, but permission. You see, we're stealing parents' best interests. We're stealing parents' rights to help determine what is best for their children. We're putting a wedge between children and their parents when we emphasize that if you're a minor, you don't have to tell your parent about your abortion. I saw firsthand from my work in the crisis pregnancy centers over and over again, whether it's high school or even many college-age women, that the hardest thing about facing an unplanned pregnancy was telling their parents. And if they could just get over that hurdle, there was a much higher likelihood that they would be able to choose life, even at times when they wanted to keep the baby and the parents weren't okay with it. And I think this speaks to why it's so important to establish an open bond with kids. Not just your children, but other children. I have a friend who's commented before she didn't have great parents, and when she'd go over to one of her friends' houses, their parents would always ask her things such as, anything you want or need to talk about, I'm happy to discuss. And it created an open place of communication in good times and in bad, feeling like there was no judgment, but grave concern and love for her. And I thought that that was significant. I remember one day, a couple years ago, when I was speaking at a pro-life camp for teenagers, one of the teenage boys came up to me and said, my parents have always told me, we're pro-life, we don't believe in abortion. They teach me about chastity and to wait and save myself for marriage, but they also told me if you do make a mistake, if you do get someone pregnant, we will help you take care of that baby. And he said it always really was a pretty significant influence, had a significant influence over me, knowing that if I did make a mistake, even knowing better, that I didn't need to be in shame, that my parents understood that people do make mistakes and I can always go to them. I think that this would be the hope that we have in building a pro-life culture, that as people of faith, yes, we hold high standards. We expect good behavior, but we don't always expect perfection. We know that people will struggle. And I think that it's important that we're ready in those instances to always continue to love those around us, to know that they have a safe place to land. You're listening to Trending with Timmerie here on Relevant Radio. Coming up will be Reggie Littlejohn. She'll join me to share about how knowing and working with Saint Mother Teresa inspired the life-saving work that she does today with her organization that she founded, Women's Rights Without Frontiers, that helps save babies from abortion, save babies from the forced sterilization and gendercide in their mothers that occur. We'll be right back here with Reggie Littlejohn.
Bridging your Catholic faith with your everyday life. You're listening to Trending with Timmerie on Relevant Radio and the Relevant Radio app.
Have you followed the Free Britney campaign that's gone on the last couple of years? And the news this past week that Britney Spears, a singer, has been released from her conservatorship 13 years later after this ongoing court battle with her father, who is a conservator. I'll share with you a little bit about this whole story. Why is it that the nation kind of rallied behind Britney Spears, and what does this have to do with freedom? We'll talk about that and more, but joining me now is Reggie Littlejohn. She is the founder of Women's Rights Without Frontiers, and she knew at the time, living, breathing saint, that is Saint Mother Teresa. Now, Saint Mother Teresa is part of what inspired her to do the work she does today with her organization that helps fight the forced one child, or now 3 child policy. It's kind of complicated. We'll briefly touch on that as well in China, as well as gendercide there in China, India, and other places. We're going to unpack today how she had the opportunity to meet and work with Saint Mother Teresa. Reggie, welcome to Trending.
Oh, thank you so much, Timmerie. It's wonderful to be back.
I'd like to dive into your story because I happened to come across some months ago a picture of you with Saint Mother Teresa many years ago, and became so excited because I love the work you do. And right away I saw the crossover to her own work and her love for the sick as well as unwed mothers and children who had been abandoned. Can you tell us a little bit about how you came to meet Mother Teresa and work with her?
Well, it's pretty interesting because at the time I was not a practicing Catholic at all, and we were going to go to India, and I thought, hey, I'll just stop by and see Mother Teresa, and little did I know, the incredible impact that she was going to have on my life. So my husband and I went to the door. Mother Teresa is called Mother Teresa Bhavan, Mother Teresa's house. And at the time, and I think probably even today, every cab driver knew exactly where Mother Teresa lived. All you had to say is Mother Teresa Bhavan. And we knocked on the big door. It's like a concrete block building. We knocked on this tall, big, heavy door, and two little sisters, so sweet-faced, opened the door and was like, "Hi, how can I help you? What would you like?" And we said, we would like to volunteer with Mother Teresa. And they opened the door and just let us in. We just walked right in. And so there were some stairs up, to this little office, which I'll describe. But on the stairs was that famous crucifix of Jesus, where underneath it says, "I thirst." So that made an immediate impression of Jesus, crucified, thirsting for souls. And then we sat outside on this little bench outside of the office, and I saw this flurry to my right, and it was Mother Teresa coming down the hall, and she personally greeted each one of us. So she took each one of our hands in her hands, and just said, "Oh, very good, very good." To each one of us. Oh, very good, very good. Her hands were very soft and warm and enveloping, and they just communicated love and compassion. No one has taken my hands in her hands the way that Mother Teresa did. You can learn so much about a person just by the way that they shake your hands. This was not a handshake. This was like an embrace of our hands between her hands. And that was my introduction to her. But there's so much more that happened between her and me in the ensuing 6 weeks that I worked there. And she was actually encouraging me to become a member of her order by the end of it. And I think I would have if I hadn't been married. I was just newly married.
Did she know you were married?
Well, okay, so okay, that's kind of, no, okay. Let me tell you the story because I don't want to blow the end of it. But so her order at the time, and I think even to this day, is very open and welcoming of volunteers. So every morning they had mass at like 5:30 in the morning, something like that. And then every afternoon they had holy hour. Again, I think it was at 4:30, 5:30. So I came late to my first holy hour, and I walked into this very stark chapel that they had there. So this chapel had a hard concrete floor, a couple of little windows, a very basic altar, with a crucifix, and a monstrance, and they were saying the rosary in such a beautiful way. It was very almost mesmerizing because they were going back and forth with the Hail Marys. And one side of the room would start the prayer, the other side would finish the prayer, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Anyway, I noticed Mother Teresa to the left at the back of the room and thought to myself, okay, I don't want her to notice me, so I'm just going to sneak in. So I snuck in the back of the room to the right and knelt down. And what they had for you to kneel on was a burlap sack. So all of these nuns were kneeling on this concrete, including Mother Teresa at her age, kneeling on this concrete, floor on a burlap sack. So I was kneeling on this sack, and just sort of wondering where we were, and I felt this presence above me, and looked up, and there was Mother Teresa, and I thought, oh no, I disturbed her during her rosary. So she bent down and very gently showed me the bead that we were on. And then went back to her place. And I thought to myself, okay, if I don't want to get Mother Teresa up in the middle of her rosary, I need to be on time. But that was just an indication of the way she was. I mean, she was willing to interrupt her rosary for somebody who was rudely late, in order to help them and show them what bead they're on. So as we were filing out, she took me aside, and I don't know why, okay? I don't know why she took me aside. There were a lot of volunteers, and she said, I would like you to be my apostle of the rosary. And I said, yes, Mother, because that's what you say. That's the only choice. That's what you say. Okay, yes, Mother. All right. Yes, Mother, what's the apostle of the rosary? And she said, I want you to hand out rosaries to everybody when they come in the door. And I said, yes, Mother, I will do so. All right. And then I left, and I thought to myself, okay, she's already seen that the only way she's going to get me to Holy Hour on time is by giving me a job that has to happen before Holy Hour.
A loving punishment.
Oh, I know. But listen, okay. So the next day, I show up early, right? That's an accomplishment for me. And I'm handing out rosaries. And most people took them, but some people didn't take them. And they said things like, no, I already have a rosary, or no, I don't want a rosary. And I'm like, okay, fine. I thought I did my job well. So we say the rosary, and then afterwards she calls me to stand beside her as people are leaving. And every person she asked, did you get a rosary from her? Did you get a rosary from my apostle of the rosary? And the people who didn't get one said no, and they didn't say why. They didn't say, I told her I don't want one, or I told her I already have one. They didn't say that. They just said no. So afterwards she looks at me and she says, you must do better, my child. And I said, yes, Mother, you are right. I'll do better tomorrow. I mean, this is the only option. You don't say, look, they didn't tell you. I mean, you don't defend yourself to Mother Teresa, okay? So I just said,
what
yes,
an act of
I'm
humility.
sorry.
What inspired that humility to not say, well, Mother, they didn't want one?
Well, there's something about her that you just don't defend yourself. It's like you just say yes. I mean, that's it. That's the only option. That's how I felt. I mean, I don't know how anybody else would feel, but I just felt like I'm not going to argue with Mother Teresa. I'm just not, okay? So the next day I show up early, and I forced everyone to take a rosary. So I became like the Gestapo of the rosaries. Like, would you like a rosary? No, you have to have this rosary. I don't want it. You have to have it, or I'm going to get in trouble. Okay, you take it here.
Put it in your pocket here.
Yeah, and so then I gave everybody a rosary. And so then as they were all leaving, she said, did she give you a rosary? Did my apostle of the rosary give you a rosary? And everybody said yes. And then she turned to me and she said, well done, my child. I said, thank you, Mother.
Oh, my goodness.
So that was sort of my introduction to Mother Teresa. But we ended up staying there for 6 weeks and working at various homes. And I can tell you many, many more stories about her and me. But, yeah, so that's the beginning.
Now, was your intention, and if you're just joining us, you're listening to Trending with Timmerie here on Relevant Radio. That's Reggie Littlejohn. She's the founder of Women's Rights Without Frontiers that helps to save children from the forced child, forced abortion policy, and sterilization in China, as well as fighting gendercide. And her work was inspired in many ways by meeting, knowing, and working with Saint Mother Teresa. Now, Reggie, when you were originally traveling, if I know correctly, you're just planning on traveling at the time. You're with your husband. Did you plan on staying in Calcutta and working with Saint Mother Teresa for 6 weeks? And if not, how did that happen?
Not for 6 weeks. Well, yeah, I mean, so we were traveling around the world, and so my intention on that trip, I was a very secular person before I worked with Mother Teresa, but my intention on the trip was basically I knew I was going to want to start a family, and so I wanted to see the world before starting the family, because once I started the family, I figured it would be another 20 years before I could see the world, right? So that was the intention. It was really more almost curiosity-driven, and we traveled everywhere. I mean, we went to Asia, to Africa, to Europe, and then after that, I actually became a travel writer. I've traveled all over the place, and I'm very grateful to have done that, because I have a knowledge of the world that I would not have had if I hadn't done that, and also a lot of places now you can't even go to because so much violence has happened in them that I wouldn't be able to go to these places anymore. So I'm very grateful that we did that. And I did intend to work with Mother Teresa, but I had intended only to work with her for 3 weeks. And after 3 weeks, I just, I couldn't leave. It's like, I can't leave. I can't leave this place. I just had to stay. And so we extended it for another 3 weeks. So we were there for 6 weeks.
Now, you said that Mother Teresa wanted you to join her order. You didn't share. Did she know that you said she didn't know that you were married at the time and your husband was there volunteering as well, correct?
Okay, so I have to tell you a story before I tell you that story. So there was a priest from New Jersey that was taking his vacation in Calcutta, and during his vacation, he was giving a retreat to the sisters. And, typical of Mother Teresa, she had him give a special session, like every day, a special session to the volunteers. I mean, she was so loving and caring towards the volunteers. So this particular session, the priest was saying, every person has a special name that's only known. You will find out what your special name is in heaven, and it's only known between you and God. And I just was pondering, I wonder what my name is in heaven. I wonder, wow, that's just such a cool idea. So after the talk was over, the volunteers were filing out, and Mother Teresa was standing there waiting for me. Okay, and she took me aside, and she said, "Heart full of love, you must take the sorry." So when she called me Heart Full of Love, I felt like that was my heavenly name. I felt like she had somehow discerned that was my heavenly name, because I really responded to that. And then she said, "You must take the sorry." Okay? The sorry meaning the habit that they wear. And she wasn't even saying, "Are you interested?" She said, "You must take the sorry," okay? That she was not really into suggestion. She was absolutely into, speaking
She's
her
a good
mind.
mom. She told you what to do.
She was telling me what to do. And I said, "Mother, I would love to." And then the other thing, I wish I'd taken her up on this, but I didn't think it was right for me to do it, because I knew I couldn't be a part of her order. If I had to do it over again, I would have asked her if I could take her up on this. But she said, "Would you come and live with our sisters for a couple weeks and see whether this is a life for you?" And instead of saying, "Yeah, wouldn't that have been something?"
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that would have been the experience of a lifetime, and I wish I had done it. Mm-hmm. One of those things you kick yourself over.
You could tell her about your husband later.
Yeah. No, I said, "Mother, I would love to, and I'm so honored that you asked, but I'm married. This is my husband." And my husband was standing next to me, and he had been next to me every time we went into her, when we were working in the different homes, when we went to, Mass, when we went to Holy Hour, he was always next to me. It never occurred to her that he was my husband. I don't, and so she just kind of looked at us, and then she said, That's fine. You can become lay missionaries of charity." And I said, "What's that?" So she went up to that little office I told you about. And I'm going to tell you something about the office, all right? I, at the time, was a law student at Yale Law School, and I had spent a couple summers as a summer associate one of them was in litigation. We had something called the War Room, and that room was a large room, floor to ceiling, just banks and banks and banks of files. And these are the documents that you use to defend your client against whatever the other guy is saying about them, okay? Everything is documented. Her entire order, all the administration, was in this little rickety file cabinet. That was it. She was in 120 countries, I think, at the time. One file cabinet. There was no sister that was dedicated to administration. All of them were serving the poor. So she goes into the file cabinet, and she takes out this document that was a long document. It was like 20 pages, and it was typewritten on onion skin paper, and it was signed in her hand at the end. And that was the order or the rules for the lay missionaries of charity. And if I had been a not nice person, I could have just taken that and not given it back, and she didn't have a copy. I mean, that was it.
Wow, so this was the original rules that she created for the Missionaries of Charity.
Not for the Missionaries of Charity, for the lay missionaries of charity.
Okay.
So the lay missionaries of charity are lay people who take the same vows as the missionary of charity. So it's poverty, chastity, obedience, and wholehearted, giving yourself wholeheartedly to the poorest of the poor. But you do it as a lay person, and the chastity part is conjugal chastity. So in other words, they're not asking you to be chaste. Or yes, it's chaste. You're chaste with your husband, right? But that was actually the problem for my husband. He looked through this document. It's like, no sex on Sundays, no sex on holy days, no sex at this time, no sex at that time. And he's like, you know what? We just got married. This is not what I signed up for. I hope I'm not embarrassing your listeners. I'm sorry, no. Timmerie. I don't know if this is like too much, but maybe too much information. But anyway.
So in other words, you had to decline.
Yeah, we had to decline. Okay, we had to decline. But that's sort of my story of Mother Teresa, encouraging me to become a member of her order. And as I said, if I had not been married, I really believe that I would have done it. I really believe I would have done it.
So you told Mother no twice. You told her no to joining not only her order because you were married, but then you told her no to join the Missionaries of Charity as well.
The lay missionaries of charity, yeah. I mean, you can't do it without your husband's cooperation. He was not,
right.
He was not going to do it. He didn't not want to do it. I mean, you can imagine a young man just married is like, what? I'm not going to, right. I'm not going to do this. This is, right. So he, so anyway, that was, that nixed that. But even if I did not become a member of her order, I mean, she had a profound impact on me.
Yeah. So you actually worked in her abandoned girls' home. Can you share with us a little bit about that?
Sure. So, and that's the place I think that had the greatest impact for me. So, there's a home called Shisha Bhavan, and it's for abandoned babies and usually babies. And I think any baby that's abandoned would be brought into that home, but I didn't see any boys there. They were all girls. And that was where she really spoke to my heart, or her ministry really spoke to my heart about the value of every life. So there was a girl there that was lying in a bed. She was unable to lift her head. She was about 3 feet long, and her body was very severely contorted. Like all of her limbs were going out in different directions. I mean, she couldn't lift her head. She couldn't stand. She couldn't sit up. She couldn't do anything. And her jaw either was dislocated or it had never been formed, because the sister asked me to feed that young girl this porridge. And so I tried to feed it to her with her head lying back, and it would just run down her cheeks into her ears. And then I tried to lift her head and feed it to her with her head lifted, and it would run down her chin and onto her chest. So I finally said to the sister, how do I do this? Because I just don't seem like I'm being very successful. Either anything I try is not very good. And the sister said, "Oh, you're doing fine. That's just how she eats." And then she said,
Wow.
"Why don't you ask her? Why don't you talk to her?" And then I realized that because she was in such terrible physical shape, I had assumed that that the same would be true of her mind, and that showed me something about myself that I didn't even realize was like a prejudice that I had. So anyway, I didn't know what to say to her. So I finally said, "Okay, so how did you enjoy your breakfast?" With her porridge in her hair and her ears and all down her chin and her face, And she broke into the most beatific, radiant smile I've ever seen in my life.
Wow.
That's how she wanted to show me how much she appreciated my effort.
Wow.
And at that moment, I realized that I was in the presence of a spiritual giant, because this woman, I found out, she looked like she was about 3 years old. She was 21 years old.
Wow.
This woman, in circumstances that would have made me feel really bitter, was a luminous, radiant soul, just beaming joy and love towards everyone. And in that smile, I understood Mother Teresa and her commitment towards every person as being of infinite value, and it doesn't matter what you look like, what your limitations are, that you are a human being of absolute infinite and eternal value. So that was a profound experience for me.
That's Reggie Littlejohn joining us now on Trending with Timmerie, heard here on Relevant Radio. Her encounter with Saint Mother Teresa changed her life and inspired the work she does today. We're going to come back a little bit to talk about the work she does today with the issue of gendercide and forced abortion in China. And we're going to talk more about how Saint Mother Teresa inspired this incredible work. That's Reggie Littlejohn from Women's Rights Without Frontiers. Again, that's Women's Rights Without Frontiers. We'll include a link in the show notes as well if you'd like to check out her and her incredible work. We'll be right back on Trending.
Bridging your Catholic faith with your everyday life. You're listening to Trending with Timmerie on Relevant Radio and the Relevant Radio app.
Joining me now is Reggie Littlejohn. She's the founder of Women's Rights Without Frontiers. It works to help women to save them from forced abortion and save their children, especially in China. She also faces and confronts the issue of gendercide. She actually was inspired to do the work that she does today by meeting and working with our very own Saint Mother Teresa. She's been sharing about some of her work with Saint Mother Teresa in Calcutta for 6 weeks. Before we continue to share a little bit more about working with Saint Mother Teresa and how that inspired what you're now doing, you shared that you actually encountered gendercide for the first time some years before in a prior visit to India. For those who don't know, gendercide is where there's a selective choice to abort a child based on that child's sex. And in places such as India, China, and even superficially here in the United States, we can see this, where people will prefer a girl over a boy, usually in China and India, and often boys over girls here in the United States. Reggie, can you share a little bit about your first encounter with this?
Yes, but actually in China and India, they prefer boys over girls.
Yes, that's right. I said it backwards.
Okay. Right. Yeah, so it's important. So yeah, this is back in 1985. I went to India by myself, and I was in this city called Varanasi or Benares. There's two names for the same city, and I wanted to take a boat ride on the Ganges River. So I was getting into this little boat, and as I was stepping into the boat, out of the corner of my eye, I noticed something floating in the water, just kind of right at my feet, right at the shore. And I looked down, and I was shocked and horrified to see that it was a baby girl, like a fully formed, looked like it was a 9-month baby girl. Full-term baby, just floating in the water, and gosh, I mean, I can't even tell you how shocked I was to see that. And the guy who was running the boat was like, don't worry about that. That's nothing. So that was my introduction to gendercide, and it's really rampant in China and India, both of those countries greatly prefer boys over girls. So that's the introduction.
Oh, now this was years before you ended up working with Saint Mother Teresa. At that time, were you already kind of thinking like, this isn't okay, this has to stop? Or was it something, a memory that was there in your past that kind of resurrected years later and inspired what you do now?
Well, I mean, it's a variety of things. So seeing the brutality of that, I mean, to me, I don't know how that baby girl got there other than that she was born and they just drowned her or something,
Mm-hmm.
Then working with Mother Teresa and all of those baby girls in Shisha Bhavan and how completely, adorable they were and so worthy of life. And then I had another experience, which was when I was an attorney. I had 2 miscarriages.
I'm so sorry.
And so losing those babies that I wanted was, when I heard about the forced abortion in China and also the sex-selective abortion of baby girls, I think it hit me on a gut level that it wouldn't have if I had not already suffered these 2 miscarriages. Mm-hmm. So the gender side, the forced abortion in China is something that is imposed by the government. The government says, you don't have permission to have this baby. So under the one-child policy, it would be for single mothers and second children. Under the 3-child policy, the new rule is every married couple is allowed to have 3 children. So people who are unmarried are still subject to forced abortion, and 4th children are subject to forced abortion. But that's by the government. Gender side, the sex-selective abortion of baby girls is something that is culturally enforced, usually by the husband and by his mother, all right? Mm-hmm. And so there's still forced abortions because most of these women do not want to abort their daughters or abandon their daughters. They're being pressured into it by their husbands and their mother-in-law, sometimes their father-in-law, but usually the mother-in-law. So that's a species of forced abortion as well. And even though I never underwent the trauma of a forced abortion, because of my miscarriage, I knew what it was like to lose babies that I wanted. And so that, I think, also is part of the inspiration behind when I found out about forced abortion in China, when I found out about sex-selective abortion, that I was willing to commit my life to ending it in a way that I might not have been if I hadn't had my own miscarriages.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. What an incredible testimony to the pain that our Lord sometimes allows us to experience in our life that can be so profound. And all of these experiences, from seeing that child who was a product of infanticide, a baby who was killed, born alive for being a girl, to your own experiences with miscarriage, and then working with these abandoned baby girls as they were growing up with Saint Mother Teresa because of that gender side there in India. It inspired incredible work that you do today. And for those who aren't familiar, can you share a little bit about Women's Rights Without Frontiers?
Well, sure. So we oppose forced abortion and the sex-selective abortion of baby girls in China. We're trying to get to India, but every time I try to go, that we can't because of the COVID lockdowns. Because there's also sex-selective abortion in India, as we discussed. But we are an advocacy organization and also have direct aid. So in terms of advocacy, I've testified like 9 times at the U.S. Congress, the European Parliament, the British Parliament, the Irish Parliament, Canadian Parliament. I don't know how many times I've spoken at the United Nations. I've briefed the Vatican, the State Department, the White House. So that's all advocacy, like briefing people on the reality of forced abortion. And especially since China, had a 2-child, became, they instituted the new 3-child policy, people need to understand forced abortion is continuing because single women are still subject to forced abortion. 4th children are still subject to forced abortion. And as a 4th child myself, I'm here to advocate for 4th children. But also in Xinjiang, the Chinese Communist Party is committing genocide against the Uyghurs, and one of the main ways that they're doing it is through forced abortion. So it's still happening. So that's the advocacy aspect. And then in terms of the direct action, we are the only organization in the world that has a network on the ground of field workers who are actively saving baby girls from sex-selective abortion, abandonment, and also just horrific poverty that's exacerbated in the countryside by this whole COVID situation.
Right.
Because most of our families are farmers. And when there's a lockdown, and our area has gone through 2 lockdowns, all right, when there's a lockdown, their vegetables just rot. And they can't get them to market because the trucks can't go to market. And so then they're driven into really desperate poverty. And unfortunately, some of these families have actually considered giving away their baby girl as an extra mouth to feed that they can't afford. So we have stepped in with, what we do is we give these families $25 a month, so in the equivalent in Chinese currency, to help support those baby girls to keep these families together.
It's incredible work what you are doing there. And again, you're the only organization that's on the ground there in China, helping to identify and have a network to know women who are struggling, who otherwise would give their baby girls away, have a forced abortion. Women's Rights Without Frontiers is Reggie Littlejohn's organization. It's, and I don't say this lightly, one of my favorite organizations when I look at the work that's being done right now. Women's Rights Without Frontiers.org to learn a little bit more about what they're doing. Your work, if you're just joining us, Reggie, your work was inspired by having worked alongside Saint Mother Teresa. Could you share with us a little bit more about some of what stood out the most to you about Mother and how that really brought you into doing what you're doing right now?
Well, 2 of her outstanding qualities were her humility and her submission to the Lord. So in terms of her humility, she was absolutely not into hero worship in any way. She always was in the background. During holy hour, she was never trying to put herself forward in any way. And this is another story. My parents actually came to visit us in Calcutta, and there's this entryway to where the nuns sleep, and you can't go in there. All right. And my dad wanted to take a picture of me with Mother Teresa. So I knocked on the entryway, it's like, hi, can I please talk to Mother Teresa? I mean, that unbelievable. Just sort of the hubris of that. And she came. She was very sweet. She considers every person to be Jesus Christ, including this snot-nosed volunteer named, Reggie Littlejohn, who just wanted to get a picture. So then I introduced her to my parents, and she was very, very gracious to them. And then my dad said, okay, I'd like to take a picture. And she was just so gracious about it. And that's where you got that picture. Okay. That's the picture.
If you've not seen the picture, I posted on social media of Reggie Littlejohn many years ago with the beautiful Saint Mother Teresa, both of whom I was in awe when I stumbled across the photo on the internet one day and went, wait, Saint Mother Teresa. What an incredible snapshot of 6 weeks of your life, Reggie.
Right, but she's not the kind of person like some people that if they're in a room, they're talking to you, but their eye is scanning the room to see who else is there that might be a more important person to talk to. You know what I'm saying? That's not the way that she was. If you were standing in front of her, she considered that to mean that God put you in front of her and that you are Jesus Christ standing in front of her, no matter whether you are, a beggar off the street or whether you are a king or a prince or princess or whatever. She treats everybody the same. And you have her full and undivided attention for as long as you need it. Another thing that happened was I was actually assaulted on the subway.
Oh, wow.
So I was going to one of the homes. I don't remember which one I was going to, on the subway. And this guy, grabbed me where you're not supposed to grab somebody, and then he ran away. I tried to chase him, and I also slugged him, so that was an issue. So
Nice
I
work.
hit him, and then I tried to chase him, but I couldn't catch him because I was wearing sandals, and I just couldn't get up the speed. So I went back, into Mother Teresa, and I was upset because I felt like I was immature Christian. Now, how could God allow this to happen to me when I'm going to do this good work for him? You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
So I said that to her. First of all, she allowed me. I said to her, Mother Teresa, may I talk to you? And she immediately stepped aside to talk to me, okay? Again, she's totally unprotective of her time. I told her the situation, and she said, I'm so sorry that happened to you, but you should never go on the subway by yourself. That's why we always have two sisters going everywhere together. And also, I'm glad that you slugged him because it's important to defend yourself.
I love it.
I mean, what a person. I mean, I'll never, ever forget her. Someday I'm going to write a book because there's so much that I have to say about her and so much that I have to say about the homes and all I learned there. The thing that you really learn about yourself when you're working in one of these homes is what your limits are. So I certainly learned what my limits were, and it was a reflection on me and my level of maturity or immaturity at the time. And then you're working next to these sisters that seem to have no limit at all to what they will do for other people.
Reggie, what an incredible testimony of how working with Saint Mother Teresa truly changed your life and inspired the life-saving and incredible work you do today. Women's Rights Without Frontiers.org is Reggie Littlejohn's website, where she battles forced abortion and sex-selective abortion in China and working to battle this in India as well. Reggie, thank you for taking the time. For those who'd like to see the photo today on social media of Reggie Littlejohn alongside Saint Mother Teresa during her 6 weeks where she worked side by side with her. Reggie's work at Women's Rights Without Frontiers is truly the only on-the-ground organization helping to save these babies from sex-selective and forced abortion there in China. So please check out the organization, Women's Rights Without Frontiers. Reggie, we're going to have you back because there's so many more stories to unpack of your time with Saint Mother Teresa and what we can learn from this great saint who you knew. We'll be back on Trending with Timmerie. Coming up next, the Family Rosary Across America. Have you noticed the mass readings have started talking about the end times, death, and judgment? This is Timmerie from Trending with Timmerie. As we approach the Advent season and prepare for Christ's coming, the Church in her readings has focused our attention to the end times. Wednesday on Trending, I'll discuss the four last things, that is death, judgment, heaven, and hell. Join me daily at 6 p.m. Central on Relevant Radio or the Relevant Radio app.